Alright, once again another Cardfight Vanguard deck profile. This time on my first deck profile on set 14 of Divines with Youthberk Fantome. The deck that I've actually been looking forward to the most when it came to all the Fantome decks, due to the fact on how much it changed from the original counterpart from being a Rebel Knight into a Dragon Slayer. And I love that the ride line actually says the lore. Instead of rebelling against the Sky Knights, it's trying to slay the dragon that killed his father. I already love Youthberk based on his design, but turning him into a Dragon Slayer, even cooler, because now he turns into a more dragon-like form, a little bit a reminder of Luard here, but this time absorbing the dragon's power to turn it into more of a dragon. And that's what I really find awesome about this deck. Just mainly for the aesthetic, but gameplay-wise, the deck is still meh here and there, it still needs cards, but how fun it is, I still like it. It plays very similar to original Youthberk, basically being able to change forms. In this case now it's called drag form instead of rebel form, and basically kind of a fusion between the two original Youthberks that we got, both from the original Youthberk Skyfall arms along with the rebuild. That's essentially the main playstyle of the deck, and also having dragons. One of the things about this deck is that it needs dragons for it to function. The more dragons in the drop zone, aka dead dragons, the more power it gets. And I love that that type of skill is actually referenced with Youthberk. And also the messed up design that it has as well also makes me really love it. But on that, there's really not much to say about it, so let's just get on with the deck profile with, of course, the ride deck. So for our ride line, we start off with the Grade 0 Youth, at least for the Dragon Empire version. And yes, you do have to run this one as the Grade 1 requires it. So with the Grade 1, when you ride it on top of the Grade 0 Youth, you can look at top 7 cards of your deck to choose either one Youthberk card or one Crimson Moon card from among them and put it to your hand, and of course shuffle your deck. Typical Grade 1 that lets you search. And then we go to the Grade 2 Youth, where when the Grade 3 Youth rides on top of it with the drag dress ability, future reference if they actually make another version, but probably not. And you can enter +3 to choose a Grade 2 or greater card from the drop zone and put it back to your hand. Luckily, it's not locked into dragons, as that is a weakness to the deck, and it will be explained with the Grade 3 Youthberk Drag Force Arm Fantome. So, it has the drag dress skill, which is actually exactly the same thing as Revel Dress. The only difference with this one is that you can only do it from hand, so you don't have the drop zone option. But also, the end phase ability of turning back to your base form is now on the drag dress skill instead of on your Revel form skill, or in this case, drag form. So keep that in mind because it does actually kind of make a difference. In which the main skill, similar to the original form of Skyfall Arms, act once per turn, you can discard a card from your hand, and then look at top 3 cards of your deck to choose up to one Grade 2 or less card to call, or a drag form card from among them and add it to your hand. And then the rest of them you can discard or put it to the bottom deck, which is actually very helpful as consistency boost because Youthberk always needs this regardless, and I'm glad that they gave it to the drag form as well, because one problem that the rebuild has is not the consistency boost. Although unfortunately it did lose the changing form from the drop zone, so I will say there is some ups and downs right there, but that consistency boost is very helpful. And also sending the stuff to the drop zone is also very helpful, as you're going to have drop zone abilities, and it's going to relate to the last skill where at the beginning of your main phase you get this skill. Keep in mind, you get this skill. When your Vanguard attacks, it gets plus 1k power for every dragon race themed unit in your drop zone. Dragon race theme, aka Dino Dragons, Flame Dragons, Thunder Dragons. Unfortunately, it can't be something like Dragoroid because it doesn't have Dragon. So there is some unfortunate stuff there, as some of the good generics you cannot synergize with this. But essentially, it gets stronger for every dead dragon you got, hence its dragon-like appearance. And then of course, when it changes forms, it becomes more powerful. And this is a completely new skill when it comes to Youthberk overall, and I just kind of like it because of it. But that also means that you also have to run dragons, and you have to kind of look for good dragons, and unfortunately a lot of good generics are not completely dragon. So you might need to choose here and there in between, because it does kind of suck that you have to maybe sacrifice some power for some good generics. So keep that in mind. And now we continue off to the main deck. Of course, 3 more for Persona Ride, because Persona riding. And then now it's time to drag dress into the drag form Dynus, which is the only drag form unfortunately, so in a way it plays similar to the rebuilt style, with only having one main form. But anyway, it has a count deck ability where while your Vanguard is Youth and you would be searching a card through a Crimson Moon card, this can be also treated as a Crimson Moon card. This is so you don't call it, and this can actually be added to your hand instead, as your Crimson Moonlight lets you search a card that is Crimson Moon and add to your hand as well. So being able to search just so you can actually keep this in hand is very helpful. On top of the part where when you perform Drag Dress, you perform all the following abilities. So first off, all your front rows get plus 5k, and your opponent's Vanguard's at least grade 3, another 5k. So that's already 10k power buff right there. But on top of that, you can counterblast 1, it gets drive plus 1, and your opponent's Vanguard's at least grade 3, crit plus 1 as well. So you perform Drag Dress, possibly 5 to 10k, along with an extra drive check and a crit of 2. But keep in mind, Drag Dress does make you drive minus 2, and then you put this, it'll be back to drive minus 1. So keep that one in mind. But very nice that this is a drag form that actually gets drive checks without needing actual other support to actually keep it with drive checks. And hopefully they put a Sequana for this deck as well so it could be twin drive. But it also has the other skill where it's the Phantom skill, so unlike the other Phantom units where it's linked to its own card, the Phantom skill is actually on the drag dress form, where when this card attacks, you can bind as many Crimson Moon cards from the drop zone as you want, and then retire the same number as bound, and then all your front row gets plus 5k power in turn. But if you have at least 3 Crimson Moons bound, plus another 5k. So this skill along with drag form can possibly give you 10 to 20k power. And also additional retire, which is always nice, but mostly more so for the power because yeah, that does additionally stack a lot, potentially 20k to the whole front row with extra crits and at least 1 drive check. So yeah, pretty good right here. And keep in mind that you're still inheriting your skill of plus 1k for every dead dragon in the drop zone. So on top of the extra 20k, possibly even more power. And most of the time on a Persona right turn, this will usually hit 40 to 50k on its own. And I just love its design as well, so that's another reason why this deck is one of my favorites. And then to continue off, 4 Crimson Moons, and I'm running the budget one because this is more of a budget deck, so I'm not taking this deck as seriously compared to the expensive moon, which will be for more of a serious deck. And then to the grade 2 lineup, Obliterate Dragon. This one on place you can counterblast 1 to look at top 5 cards of your deck to choose up to 1 Youthberk card from among them to put to your hand, but if you fail you countercharge 1. So essentially it's like the Schneisel for the deck, although we did not get Schneisels as we got an actual dragon instead. But the other ability is that in the drop zone, while your Vanguard is a Youthberk, you can Soul Blast 2 cards that are Youth and call it to rearguard. So Recovery Dragon, discard fodder on top of it because of it, and also Searcher, that's why it's a 4 of. And on top of being superior called, it gets plus 5k, so it could be a big beater on its own. Although your Vanguard's attack is always going to go first as you want to perform Drag Dress as soon as possible, so you can buff this up. But it is nice that it could recover because this deck really needs all the recovery it can get, along with draw power. And then Florin Hope Dragon. So this one, when you're at least grade 3 or greater Vanguard Youthberk attacks, it gets plus 5k in any turns. So with the drag form, it gets plus a total of 10k. And then at the end of battle that this unit attacks, if you perform Drag Dress this turn, you can retire this unit to draw a card. So additionally of adding another dragon plus more draw power, which is very nice and it could be a big beater on its own. So I kind of like it for that reason. And besides, there's not other good dragons out there besides the Dragon Vortex, which I cannot afford, so it's not actually in this deck. But if you do have Dragon Vortex, I might actually prefer that over this card, as Dragon Vortex still kind of pluses you, but in the early game as well, and it could be a big booster, which is also something that the deck kind of needs, and it could be an attacker, but this one being a big beater on its own is already nice enough. And then finally 4 Crimson Moon Searchers, because Crimson Moon's for Searchers. You don't need to run 4 of these, and if you have Dragon Vortex, you could probably cut a few copies of this down just for the Dragon Vortex, but I don't have the money for that. And personally, I do actually want to search the Crimson Moon so you could actually get as much power as possible. And then to the grade 1 lineup. So first off, Banishing Claw. I don't see many people run this, but it's actually kind of useful because of the part where when this card is discarded from deck or hand during your turn, and other than during battle, while you have at least a grade 3 Vanguard Youthberk, you can Soul Blast 1 and call this to rearguard. So it's a discard fodder that could be during any time of your turn other than during battle, and it also recovers itself, so it could be a booster. But like I said, if you have Dragon Vortex, that's another option that you can replace this for that, but because I don't have the budget, run this instead. And it has the other ability where while your Vanguard's Youth, it gets plus 5k shield, so it becomes a 10k shield that could be a discard fodder that can also superior call itself. Very nice, it helps you recover, so pretty decent card to run. Of course, if you have better stuff, go ahead and run them, but it's still Dragon Race. And then one card I personally kind of like and don't like at the same time, it's the Drag Ritter Uhach. So this one is not a dragon, unfortunately, being a Dragoroid. That's the reason why I don't like to run this card in the deck, but it is actually very helpful at the same time because when placed from hand or placed by a Crimson Moon ability, you can look at top character deck to choose up to one dragon or a Crimson Moon from among them and put it to the drop zone. This is actually a pretty useful ability because, as you can tell, you have drop zone abilities. Also, a card that counts as discarded from deck is still counted as discarded to Superior Call as well. And also, it's a Crimson Moon search technically that also makes this very useful because of it. And I did find myself using it a few times and it is a little helpful because of it. But because it's not a dragon, it does hinder the power threshold sometimes, but it's not the worst thing in the world. In which the second ability in Rearguard Guardian, while you have at least 5 dragons in your drop zone, it gets the intercept ability and can do it from the back row. And then, if you have a bind zone with a Crimson Moon, plus 5k shield as well. So it's a back row interceptor as well, which could be a substitute for Dragon Vortex if you have the budget for it, and I'd rather use this over Dragon Vortex as it's way cheaper. And it acts as a searcher too, so it just has its usefulness. If you have personal preferences of other stuff you prefer to run, it's all up to you. But one card I definitely thought of running is Submit Flare Dragon because it's the generic grade 3 searcher that lets you remove 2 cards that were originally from the Ride deck and put them back to the Ride deck to look at top 5 for a different grade 3 from your current grade 3. But if you miss, it does go back to your hand, and it also becomes a 10k shield or 15k shield if you're facing against G units. So, few reasons why I like this. One, it's actually a dragon, so you discard it, it's just more power for Youthberk, and it can also add some consistency for drag dress. And if you do miss, at least you get some extra shield in your hand. So to me, it's kind of a win-win regardless, and you're going to be soul blasting a lot anyway, especially your ride line, so having these isn't too bad. Although I would say if you have the manga promo for Skyride that lets you search from top 5 for a grade 2 or higher, I do prefer running that, but unfortunately I'm using that for another deck, so I'm using this instead. And then finally 4 PGs because PGs, and make sure you pick dragons so you have full synergies for dragons. And then to the trigger lineup, Drag Vita, because it's also a dragon, so it's also for that reason as well. 8 crits, full on dragons. 3 draws, and 4 heals, 2 being counters, and the heals I pick are Dino Dragons, and if you do want to, you can go ahead and run 4 dragon themed heals instead of having 2 counters, but it's only 1k power, so it's not too much of a difference. And so that's it for this deck profile, my Youthberk Fantome deck. What do you guys think of it? What other cards would you recommend? And what other changes would you make? Other than recommending the overpriced Dragon Vortex, and even maybe the manga Skyride card that lets you search because I'm using all those up. But go ahead and recommend other cards because I'm always open for suggestions, especially for this deck where it's actually completely open to basically any dragon themed cards. Because there might be some other dragon themed cards that I might have forgot that are generic. And overall, I do like this deck, mainly for its design and aesthetic because Youthberk becoming a dragon slayer and absorbing dragons and becoming more like a dragon is just awesome. And I am a sucker for dragons, hence why I just love the deck. It does play similar to the original 2 Youthberks merged into one. Unfortunately, it still suffers the Youthberk inconsistency sometime of if you don't have the drag form, well, you're kind of screwed. And because the main grade 3 plays more similar to the original one, you unfortunately can't even do drag form from the drop zone, while also playing similar to the rebuilt version with just having one Rebel form, or in this case drag form. But other than that, the deck is just overall fun. You have quite a good amount of recovery, I would have to say, and definitely a lot of power, but still suffers the inconsistency problem sometimes of being able to get your main grade 3, so there is that. But overall, it's just a fun deck, and if you just love Youthberk and love him into a dragon form, I could say I could recommend playing this deck, especially since it's not actually too expensive if you don't go with the expensive cards, like this version here. And you can also just build this whole deck practically from set 14, other than just finding the triggers. But on that, that's it for this, and see you all next time.